There are phenomena in human nature that, on one hand, are biologically, evolutionarily, and psychologically natural. On the other hand, for those interested in self-discovery and self-development, these phenomena inevitably require a conscious, investigative look to achieve a deeper understanding of one's nature, first and foremost. We will examine one of these phenomena, which, in my view, is the single greatest obstacle on the path to self-revelation. It is the reason why a person lives in infernal semantic tension, in the illusion of understanding themselves, others, and life. And it is this unyielding tension that prevents the release of the energy of freedom, lightness, and the feeling of unconditional self-satisfaction. Some call it happiness, and hinders the experience of one's true nature. This theme is the lie that hides the truth about ourselves. So, what is a lie? It is an ancient, universal phenomenon woven into the very fabric of human psyche, culture, and biology. It is a form of adaptation. It arises where the truth becomes dangerous. From a biological perspective, lying is a survival mechanism. In the animal kingdom, similar behavior is called mimicry. A caterpillar pretends to be a twig. A fish buries itself in the sand. A predator freezes. In humans, lying has become more sophisticated. It lives in language, in a glance, in silence. Lying is a biologically determined ability requiring complex neural work, psychologically motivated by various intentions, philosophically controversial from a moral standpoint, condemned by religions but permitted in exceptional cases, and a socially inevitable part of interaction. Its nature depends on context, intention, and consequences. Robert Trivers, a biologist and evolutionist, in his work The Folly of Fools, argues that lying is not an anomaly but part of the evolutionary toolkit. We are deceived because evolution taught us to deceive ourselves. Self-deception is what helps us deceive others better, he said. And to survive ourselves, I will add once more, lying is like dancing on thin ice. One wrong step and you fall through. But what makes us lie? Why does our brain, this 3-pound masterpiece of evolution, handle deception so masterfully? Let's look into the neurophysiology of lying to understand how our brain works when truth gives way to fiction. When does a lie arise? It emerges at the intersection of 3 conditions. The danger of truth, when the truth can lead to pain, punishment, or loss. The presence of a goal, a lie, almost always serves to achieve a benefit or avoid harm. And the context of trust. A lie is only possible where truth is expected. Logical, isn't it? Psychologist Paul Ekman, who studied microexpressions in lying, says, lying is a social act. Where there is no interaction, lying is pointless. So, if you want to remove lying from your life, you have to remove everyone else. Imagine you're late for work. Instead of an honest, I got stuck in traffic, you come out with, the neighbor's cat got stuck in the window, I had to save it. In that moment, your brain is like a Blockbuster Director. The lead role goes to the prefrontal cortex, which plans the lie and suppresses the truth. It says, don't reveal that you overslept. Come up with something epic. But it's not alone. The anterior cingulate cortex monitors the internal conflict. The truth is bursting to get out, and you're holding it back. The amygdala switches on if you're afraid the boss will notice the trick, or if you feel a pang of guilt for the fabrication. And the parietal cortex helps keep the details in mind so your story doesn't collapse like a house of cards. Right, I said, the cat was Ginger. Mustn't get confused. Lying is a cognitive marathon. The brain has to work at its limit so the truth doesn't slip out first. Lying takes more mental effort than the truth. It's like juggling flaming torches while riding a bicycle, said neurobiologist Sam Harris, author of the book Lying. Research confirms it, lying requires more effort. In 2001, Daniel Langelman and his team showed that people respond more slowly when they lie because the brain spends time suppressing the truth and creating fiction. For example, if someone asks you, hey, were you at the bar yesterday? And you want to hide the truth, the brain first needs to muffle the memories of cocktails and invent a story about an evening with a book. Thus, lying is a process with a clear internal structure. It's built on the following algorithm: realization of the truth. The person must understand the real state of affairs. Evaluation of consequences, calculating the benefits and risks of truth versus lies. Creation of an alternative reality, forming a version different from reality. Behavioral regulation, control of speech, facial expressions, gestures, and maintaining the version. Lying requires constant fueling and protection. Physiologically, this process activates the frontal lobes of the brain zones, responsible for planning and control. The amygdala, linked to emotions, and the insular cortex, responsible for the awareness of internal states, including feelings of guilt and anxiety. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging confirm this. Lying isn't just about neurons, it's about chemistry. When you lie, the body releases adrenaline as if you're running from a tiger. Your heart beats faster, your palms sweat. This is the reaction to the risk of exposure. Suppose you tell a friend, "I didn't see your message," even though you read it 3 times. Adrenaline goads you. What if he checks? If the lie succeeds, for example, you're praised for the heroic rescue of the ginger cat. The brain rewards you with dopamine. It's like a candy for a well-performed trick. But there's a dark side of the moon. Cortisol, the stress hormone, reminds you of potential guilt. Imagine you lied to your wife or husband. "I was working late," while you were actually at a bar with friends. Cortisol will whisper, she or he might find out. Interestingly, the brain can get used to deception. In 2016, Neil Garrett and his colleagues found that repeated lying reduces amygdala activity. At first, you blush while making up, "I didn't take the cookie from the jar." But after a dozen such stories, the brain doesn't even blink. It's like coffee. At first, it gives you a heavy kick, but later, you need a whole pot. Lying is like poison. In small doses, it heals. In large doses, it destroys. But the habit of lying blunts the conscience, said the Dalai Lama. A person accustomed to lying stops noticing where the truth ends and fiction begins. It's like a drug, he added. Why do we lie at all? Well, first, it's self-preservation. We lie to avoid punishment, pain, or judgment. This is a basic protective mechanism rooted in the survival instinct. As we already said, even in childhood, lying serves this purpose. "I didn't break the vase," screams the child to avoid being punished. Second, social expectations. Often, a lie is dictated by an attempt to conform to norms. We hide our thoughts and feelings so as not to disrupt the balance in relationships or to save face. Lying is not just a distortion of reality, it is a tool for preserving the social fabric, said Dan Ariely, a behavioral economist. Third, psychic defense. A person can lie to themselves, and this is the most dangerous lie. It's when we ignore signs of toxic relationships or deny an addiction. These are forms of psychological repression and rationalization described by Sigmund Freud. Lying starts in childhood when we learn to understand others. At 3 or 4 years old, a child can already say, "It wasn't me who broke that vase," because their prefrontal cortex has learned to model other people's thoughts. It is during this period that it matures. This is called theory of mind, the understanding that other people can think differently. Without it, lying wouldn't exist. People with damage to their frontal lobes, by the way, often tell the blunt truth. For example, you look terrible because they can't invent a polite lie. Lies come in different forms. Sometimes they are selfish. "I didn't copy your report," you tell a colleague, even though your file is an exact copy of theirs. Sometimes they are pro-social, "Grandma, the soup was delicious, even though you barely swallowed a spoonful." Or, "That dress suits you," we say while thinking otherwise. Neurophysiologically, a white lie is easier. The amygdala barely reacts because you don't feel guilt. But if you lie to avoid a fine, for instance, "Officer, I was doing 60, while the needle was off the scale," stress and cortisol redline right along with it. A lie for the sake of peace is a bridge between people, but it is fragile, wrote Augustine of Hippo, conceding that sometimes deception is justified. Or, a lie for the good of another is not a sin but the art of living together. He also said, though he added that any lie distances us from the truth. When does a lie arise? What are the triggers? It most often occurs in situations of conflict of interest. The listener must not know the truth when there is a fear of consequences, loss of status, love resources, a desire for gain, manipulation, seduction, or the protection of another, a lie for the greater good. And here a question arises: can one lie for the sake of good? Plato justified the noble lie as a tool for governing the masses. If a lie can serve the good of the state, it is permissible, but only to those who know why and how to apply it, he said. This idea still sparks fierce debate. Is a lie permissible for the sake of peace, security, or stability? Look at what's happening around us now. But it has always been this way, in all times. Humanity is in its adolescent period, hence all the symptoms of adolescence, the drive for independence, self-assertion, self-expression, protest against social pressure, and so on and so forth. What are the great and small nations doing right now? Immanuel Kant is categorical. You must not lie under any circumstances, even if a lie saves a life, because lying destroys the very possibility of a moral law based on reason and freedom. Lying is the destruction of human dignity and the undermining of the very nature of communication, he said, in the Critique of Practical Reason. If a lie were permissible even once, trust vanishes, and without trust, society is impossible. Nietzsche perceives lying not as a moral problem, but as an existential necessity. He argues that man himself lives in illusions, faith, morality, ideals. These are all high forms of lies that allow one to survive in the chaos of existence. We do not want truth. We want peace, certainty, happiness. Truth demands too high a price, he wrote. According to Nietzsche, honesty is the province of the strong. The rest need illusion. The philosopher Jacques Derrida raises the question of the blurred boundaries between truth and lies. Postmodernism rejects a single truth, only interpretation remains. Psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan goes further. He argues that the I is itself a lie, constructed through language and social masks. Language itself is already a lie, he said. The modern world puts us in situations where moral evaluations of lying are not so clear-cut. Can you withhold a terminal diagnosis from a friend if they won't be able to handle it, or stay silent so as not to destroy a family? Is it possible to catch a liar? We all dream of unmasking deception. Polygraphs measure pulse, sweat, and breathing reactions of the sympathetic nervous system, but they are unreliable. In 10 to 30% of cases, truth and lies are confused. Why? Stress doesn't always mean a lie. If you're asked, "Did you steal the money?" you might sweat simply from indignation. Modern methods, like functional MRI again, are not a panacea yet either. A lie looks different in every brain. In psychopaths, for example, the amygdala barely switches on. They lie as naturally as they breathe. A lie is a shadow that is hard to catch. It changes shape depending on the color, noted Paul Ekman, the guru of microexpressions. Detecting a lie is like looking for a needle in a haystack where the needle is constantly changing shape, he remarked. Lying is not just words. It is a complex dance of neurons, emotions, and decisions. It is a mirror reflecting the power of our brain. It shows how flexible it is. It can suppress instincts, build entire worlds, and balance on the edge of truth. But this gift has a price. You have to pay for it. Extra neurons, spikes in adrenaline, shadows of guilt. Every time you say, "I didn't forget your birthday," even though the gift was bought in a panic an hour ago, your brain puts on a little performance. Lying burdens us, forcing us to balance between truth and fiction, between gain and conscience. So is it worth lying? Sometimes it saves relationships, like a compliment. "You look great, honey," even though honey clearly hasn't slept. Sometimes it destroys trust, like a lie about just one drink when you can barely stand. The brain gives us a choice, and we decide how to use its gift. So next time you want to embellish a story, think about it. Your brain is already preparing a whole performance, and maybe it's worth giving it a rest. To choose the truth or not, it's up to you or your brain to decide. What do you think? Ultimately, as long as a person does not realize the main lie in their life, all the lie-to-me-type games will continue due to the structure of personality and social nature. This lie lies in the certainty that I am a personality, unique and unrepeatable. In part, yes, but overall, no. Fortunately, in the literal sense of the word, personality is a made, artificial thing that doesn't just appear in a child on its own. It requires effort from other personalities. It is they who transfer all the necessary files for survival and adaptation into the empty consciousness of the child, essentially installing all the basic settings through their presence and interaction. Something like that. By the way, movies about lying. Though, if you look closely, every movie features both lies and deception. Without them, there is no intrigue. And without intrigue, what pleasure is there in watching life?